Oh, thank you, Tom, for getting us in the holiday spirit. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Tulsa. I'm Karen Keith, and thanks for coming out on such a cool, cold day. Lots happening today. Song and Pledge by Jerry Murator. On the piano, of course, Tom Wolfe. Our visitor introductions by past President Bob Sade, and now our invocation will be given by past President Matt Davis.
Will you bow your heads with me, please? Lord, we pause at this busy holiday time of year to give thanks for our many blessings and to lift up those who are less fortunate. We particularly pray today for those suffering with mental illness and pray that the darkness of stigma, labels, and exclusion might be dispelled by the light of greater understanding, acceptance, and respect for the dignity of every person through the hard work of those in the mental health profession. We pray for our country's leaders that they might always be aware of the needs of the less fortunate. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Tom and I have a little special treat. You'll recognize it once we get started. Ready, Tom? Oh, wait a minute. Tom, did everybody get the words to Handel's Messiah? Do we have anybody who speaks Latin? Kathleen? Old Catholics die hard, don't they? Yeah. Well, since no one got the words, Tom, let's do America the Beautiful, followed by the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we are always thrilled to have guests and visiting Rotarians, and as Karen pointed out, especially on a day like today. At this point, I will introduce the host Rotarian and ask them to stand with their guest, and we will hold our applause until all have been introduced. These are the same instructions we give every week, but as I pointed out about 8 or 9 years ago, we have to repeat them because some of our folks went to OU. So,
You might need to repeat that.
yeah. David Wagner has with him today Justin Johnson with Schnocky Turnbow Frank. Matthew Bristow brought Josh Love. Michael Turner has his wife Lisa Turner, who is the Director of Development in the Mental Health Association. Greg Keck has Allison Walden with the Tulsa Chamber. And finally, Steve Mason brought Glenn Zanotti with the OSU Foundation. Let's give him a round of applause. And we have one visiting Rotarian from the Sunrise Club, past District Governor Tom Clark. Hi, Tom. Please come back whenever you can, especially next week where we'll be celebrating OSU's victory this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Bob. Our Rotary sponsors this week are Ron Butler, Butler & Butler Advertising and PR, Terry Heritage, Interim Healthcare, Diane Peacock, Peacock Financial Services, and Bill Rothrock and John Rock and Jim Stevenson with Yale Cleaners. And of course, we encourage you to do business with your fellow Rotarians. Please thank all of today's sponsors and all of our great volunteers. And thank you to past President Bob Vassar. He's our election committee chair and his team for their service today. So I hope everybody's gotten their ballots. If you haven't, you might put your arm in the air and they'll make sure you got your election ballot. Anybody, we miss anybody? All right, and they'll be picking them up as well. All right, great way to raise money, Bob. Thank you. Our committee meetings today, Above and Beyond, room 232, Classifications, room 233, Up with Trees, room 234, and the Youth Exchange, the Beacon room. And in announcements, on behalf of the club, I would like to extend condolences to Rotarian Gary McCall on the passing of his mother-in-law Thursday, November 21st. Services were Monday in Ozark, Missouri, so please keep the McCall family in your prayers. Our dues invoices will be coming to you electronically. I know that's exciting news. So please watch your inbox this week. And of course, we made this change as a board in order to save on some operating expenses. And now Ed Monette joins us with an update on the First Class Challenge. Ed?
Thank you, Karen. For those of you that haven't been here for a month, Tina, we are attempting to be the first large club in the world to answer President Ron Burton from Oklahoma a challenge to have 100% of the club give something to Rotary International. If you'll recall, if you give to Polio Plus, Bill and Melinda Gates match it 2 for 1. So, because of the holidays, we have not been able to finalize our count. We are scary close to doing it. For those of you all that have not had an opportunity to give something, the amount is not important at all. It's the fact that you give something. And again, the matching works. If you don't want to give it to polio, we can give it to the general fund. But we need to get it done. I'm sure we will have a wonderful announcement next week once we get everything counted, because there's been quite a few gifts given just today. So please, if you haven't given, do so. If you have, thank you very much. You look at your badge and you'll see a red dot. It means you've given. If you don't see a red dot, it means you haven't. Try to make this real simple. So thank you very much.
Is that for the folks from OU? Sorry. My chief of police and Rotarian, Chuck Jordan, has asked if I could mention, Chief, if you want to stand up. They're having a major toy drive. They had over 1,000 people sign up. So if you have any toys you want to drop off at the Riverside Division, it would be much appreciated. There's a great need out there. So thank you, Chief. Are there any other election ballots that need to be turned in? So everybody turned in. All right, I'm going to declare the election closed. And Bob, you can get after it. Thank you very much. Okay, if Judge David Peterson would come forward, I think he's got some news for us on the water well.
Hi, on behalf of the Water Well Committee, I would just like to remind you that if you have employees and you're a boss or vice versa, and nobody knows what to give anybody for Christmas, a water well certificate hanging in your lobby or office space is a good thing. Those of you who have children beyond the believer's age, that's a great thing to give too. We're trying to get a little money together for the poor in Nicaragua to have pure, clean drinking water. We're very successful in that. We drilled 54 wells last year. Our equipment is getting a little old and it's going to need some parts here and there to get so we can keep drilling. So if you could be generous to that project, it's a good idea. I remember when I worked at the courthouse, my staff didn't know what to give me and vice versa. We used to go get something off of one of the angel trees and just do that, and everybody felt better and happier. This is very similar. Would you please consider it? It'll do a lot of good. Thank you.
That's a brilliant idea. And Brad Anthematin, we've got Salvation Army Bell Ringers event for tomorrow. And Brad, we've got issues, don't we?
I think my phone changed since I was up here a week ago, because now it's saying 28 and windy and much colder periods.
Not
of
as you
snow,
promised.
Sleet, freezing
No.
rain. So I've been very popular today. I have to admit that. So that's been kind of fun. Everybody's like, concerned about this. So.
Yeah. So
Based upon this, we have come to the executive decision of moving our date because We certainly, if we did it tomorrow, there's going to be nobody out anyway, and we don't want to lose the prize.
No, we do not. We want to
So-
be the best every year.
That's right. So if you signed up, here's your chance to get out. And you don't have to email me, call me, because trust me, I've been fielding a few. We're looking at going either the 12th or the 19th, which are the next 2 consecutive Thursdays. So if you signed up, actually we're going to do kind of a show of hands to see what date would work best. So either if you signed up or if you didn't and still would like to, if you had a conflict for tomorrow, why don't you put your hand up if the 12th is better than the 19th for you? Somebody counting? Or are we just going to kind of straw poll?
We'll straw poll it, okay?
Okay. That's good for the 12th. How about the 19th?
Oh, that looks about even. Okay. Commander Taylor. Did you count the votes, sir? Okay, you're a
We do
big
a little better
help.
job counting the votes in the other election.
Brad, your call.
Well, if we did the 12th, we'd lose Petty's, which I know would probably break Scott's heart. The 19th, we could have all of our typical locations. So
Okay. So we are choosing the 19th. Commander Taylor, thank you for stepping in and helping us with this crisis. So we're going to do the 19th. So if we're going to take and just move everybody over in their time slot. Now, if you have an issue, you will need to let us know.
yes, please.
Okay.
So
All right.
the board
Gosh.
will be outside after the meeting, and so I expect a large line of people signing up in those empty slots that are still out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Well done. And Paula Wood, Shop with a Cop.
I'll hurry. But Karen and I actually were in a meeting with Howard Barnett earlier, and they've called off Bedlam because they realized that Shop with a Cop was Saturday. So I just wanted to let you know that it's supposed to be funny. Okay, so there is on the screen you'll see the list of volunteers for Saturday. If your name's not on there, it's just a mistake, so just let me know. But just on the serious side, we are going to have Shop with the Cop, and I counted up all of the family members of the 37 students. It's about 157 people, wonderful families that are expecting gifts. So we need you there. It's going to be cold, but I think you can, maybe we could carpool or something like that. So we'll see you on Saturday. Thanks.
Thank you, Paula. And Brenda Melancon.
Thank you, President Karen. This is the season for giving, and what a better way to give than to work at MS&I Warehouse. We're going to go Saturday, December 21st from 8 to 12, and we'll have donuts and coffee, and we'll pack and sort inventory items that will be sent to the Philippines. Please consider donating your time for this cause. Those people are still in great need, and what a great gift we can give right before the holidays. There's sign-up sheets on the tables if you want to sign up, and you can see myself, Dave Peterson, or Ben Wyndham if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Brenda. And Sarge. Welcome, Janet Rockefeller. Hey, Janet, I think you owe us something. I believe I saw where you were in the paper. You got caught, by the way. New job. Congratulations.
Oh, well, at least you didn't see my picture in the post office, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll pay a fine. Okay,
Thank
I
you.
just have a couple this week. So December birthday and anniversaries, I'll be getting out reminder letters to you to pay a fine. Okay, this one is Jan Lobb, and she won, for America, an award for her potato salad. And if she would just even give 1% of the money she won, that'd rock. And I think one of the reasons why she won is because there are bacon drippings in that, and everything's better with bacon. So way to go, Jan, congratulations. And to that end, Joy Longmire is giving $100 because Jan was her Rotary sponsor. So congratulations to everybody. And that's all I have this time.
Our Rotarian of the day is Desiree Doherty. She joined our club in January 2008. Desiree is the Executive Director of the Parent Child Center of Tulsa. She is currently our 2013-2014 Community Service Director on our board and is both a Club Foundation Fellow and a Paul Harris Fellow. And as you know from our mystery Rotarian, a wannabe race car driver. Please welcome Rotarian of the Day, Desiree Doherty.
Thank you, President Karen. I'm very pleased to introduce today our speaker, Rhonda Noonan. Rhonda was born in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and was given up for adoption at birth. She was named Baby Girl Kim by the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. She was renamed Rhonda Noonan and raised in a small central town of Tonkawa. She was cherished by her adoptive family, and she had a great desire to know her birth parents. However, like much of the United States, Oklahoma is a sealed record state, leaving Rhonda unable to access her true original birth certificate. In her search for her biological parents and the truth about her family's origins, she spent over 30 years and thousands of dollars to search through the state of Oklahoma's sealed adoption records. She waded through the rulings of endless judges, attorneys, and detectives, hundreds of filings, and mountains of paperwork to track down lead after lead and unearth her true story. In the end, she found her past and a reality that was beyond all imagination. She found that her biological father is Randolph Churchill, the son of British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. She has spent, you will not be surprised to know, much of her career working with adoptees and their families. She dreams of the day when adoptee rights are restored in every state in America and when every person has access to their heritage. Rhonda lives in Sand Springs with 2 dachshunds and 2 horses. Please welcome Rhonda Noonan.
Good afternoon, everybody. You will easily discern from my Oklahoma accent that I was not raised anywhere near London. I have indeed lived in this state all but 5 years of my life. I had a short stint in Colorado. So whatever observations you might make or similarities to biological folks sounding like my grandfather is not one of them. Even as a small child, I was aware not only that I was adopted, but that being adopted meant that I had lost people, that I had lost biological family. My adoptive mom tells of talking to me when I was 2 years old about this thing called adoption, and she said, "Are you my special adopted little girl?" And I shook my head no, that I was not adopted. So she said, "Well, are you my special chosen little girl?" And I could go with that, so I said yes. Even at that age, I knew that being adopted was not something I wanted to be. Now, when I was in grade school, we were asked to tell where our families had originated. And I promptly went to my grandmother. She was my go-to person. And I said, "Grandma, where am I from?" And she said, "Well, I am from Ireland and England." And I said, "Yes, but I need to know where I'm from." And she very definitively stated, "You are from the same place I'm from." Now, as much as I wanted that to be true, I knew that it wasn't true. And I was somewhat annoyed with her insistence upon ignoring what I felt was obvious, even at that young age. Little did I know at that time that I would spend a good deal of my adult life searching for answers to that question, where am I from? So I'd like to tell you a little bit of my story. It's a complicated one, so I'm going to blow through some of the high points here. Like you heard earlier, my adoptive parents lived and raised me in Tonkawa. Everybody know where Tonkawa is, up by Ponca City? Yes. My grandparents also lived there, my adoptive mother's parents, Howard and Marie Harold. Now, my mom, believing she couldn't conceive a child, had applied to the State Department of Human Services to see about adopting a baby. It was a very long process, in her case, almost 4 years. And toward the end of that time, she was very frustrated, and she called on my granddad, Howard, to offer a hand in this. Now, Howard Harold was the academic dean of what was at that time Northern Oklahoma Junior College. Today it's just Northern Oklahoma College. And he was a member of the State Board of Regents. As such, he knew Governor Raymond Gary and Lloyd Rader, who was at that time the director of the Department of Human Services. His good friend and neighbor was also a member of Governor Gary's staff and had offered to help my family by arranging an interview for my adoptive parents with Mr. Rader, which he did. In addition to those connections, there was at that time a group of men referred to as the Tonkawa Mafia. Now, if you've ever been to Tonkawa, you'll find more than a little humor in the idea that they might have had their own mafia. But I suppose there were crimes to be organized in 1955. You know, prohibition was still in place, and as I understand it, prostitution was active along the banks of the Chickasaw River. So I suppose all that needed managing. The fellows that were involved in those businesses were all friends of my granddad's. Now, he wasn't involved in liquor or women, at least as far as we know. But he was considered a pillar of the community, as these other fellows were. They all played golf together, and they attended the Masonic Lodge together. They were friends. The Tonkawa Mafia was also linked to the governor's office, and most specifically to Lloyd Rader with their business dealings. In fact, a member of the group who worked out of Oklahoma City was a friend of my birth mother's, I would find out many years later. So the connections between Oklahoma City and Tonkawa and my family were many and easy to see. Now, during the spring of 1956, the FBI showed up in my little town. They interviewed the Harrells, employers of my soon-to-be adoptive mother, and several businessmen in the community who had known the family for many years. I was born in July of that year. And in November, my adoptive parents, who were at a friend's house playing bridge one evening, received a call from my grandmother Harold saying that people at the city were trying to find them. And they had called her to see if she knew where they were. It was 10 o'clock in the evening, so it was fairly late. She stated that my mom was to return the call immediately, and my mom said, "Well, I'll call right now." And my grandmother said, "No, you can't call right now. They were very specific to say that you must go home and call from your home phone." Now, the calling from home only requirement was something that remained in place until after my adoption was finalized. Clearly, the calls were being monitored, but believe it or not, that idea was never really entertained by my parents. They didn't think too much about it. When my mother finally called the city, she was told they needed to be in Oklahoma City by 8 a.m. the next morning. They needed to go to a hotel across the street from the Capitol, let the desk clerk know who they were, and wait. And they did just that, and 45 minutes later, someone they had never seen before walked in with me. A few months later, during a home visit, the caseworker commented across the room to my grandmother, "If I told you the last name of a baby being adopted, you would know immediately who it was, because they are famous." Now, you had to know my grandmother. She was fearful up till I was a teenager that somebody was going to come take me away from them. So she never pursued this comment about who the biological parents might have been. She didn't want to know. She wanted them to leave her alone, and she wanted to leave them alone. Now, just as there were strange happenings in Tonkawa prior to my placement, there were also strange things happening in Oklahoma City, which is where my birth mother lived. My birth mother was the widowed parent of 4 other girls at the time she gave birth to me. She met Randolph Churchill at the Tinker Air Force Base Officers Club. You know, in the 50s, the Officers Club was the happening place to go out and dance and have an evening out. She stated to DHS that she had had no affection for the man, and later shared with my half-sister that at the time she did not even know who he was. My sisters have offered their own observations to me about things that happened during the time my mother was pregnant with me. The family was abruptly moved from Oklahoma City to Shawnee, and this was a very impoverished family, a single mom trying to care for 4 girls. So they had no money. They noticed strange men coming to the door from time to time, and their mother was always very secretive about that. She would shuffle them off or shut the door in the face of whoever was there. Twice they saw money exchange hands. In December of 1955, my birth mother took up with a man in a bar outside of a hotel in downtown Oklahoma City, asked him to take her home, seduced him, got his identifying information, and gave it to DHS, telling them he was my birth father. I met that man in 2006. His name was Robert Schultz, and he was, fortunately for me, a retired Federal Border Patrol agent. Now, I say fortunately for me because he had to keep very meticulous daily logs of his activities, and he had kept those logs all these years. Remarkably, he remembered a great deal about the night he had met my mother. He had never forgotten it, and commented that he had seen men following them that night, and he felt like he had stepped in it. He felt like he had been set up somehow. He just didn't know how. Because, he explained, it wasn't the norm in 1955 for a woman to pick up a man unless she was a prostitute. And Robert remarked that he was certain that was not the case, so he was very perplexed by the whole thing. He was so paranoid about it, in fact, that after he was located by the DHS intermediary on my behalf, it took him almost a year and repeated reassurance from me and the department that I was not in contact with my birth mother, because had I been in contact with her, he wanted nothing to do with me. He finally did consent to communicate and sat down with me and showed me in the logs he had kept when he had been with my mother. It was just before Christmas, a full 2 months into her pregnancy. My birth mother would admit to my sister 54 years later that Robert Schultz had nothing to do with me, and added, I knew she would never get anywhere with him. Just an example of the lengths they went to try to hide this whole thing. So as you can see, things were far from normal with my adoption. But I suppose if you were the son of the greatest man in Britain, on the tail end of your second marriage, and looking to hide a baby, what better place than the wheatland of Oklahoma? No one would ever guess it, right? As for how exactly I uncovered it all, way too much to tell in this little presentation. You'll have to read the book. I will tell you that almost 30 years from the day I started looking, I found the woman who had been the executive assistant to Lloyd Rader, who had met with Randolph Churchill and Lloyd Rader about my adoption. And if you don't think that was a very big day for me, that was a very big day. It's my hope that this book, the fifth and final name that I have written, will offer a glimpse for those of you who don't know what it's like to be adopted into what it is like to live without a history, to live without knowledge of your own ancestry. It's my firm belief that no social institution should ever be able to hold our histories hostage. To that end, I've offered a rather raw, just as it happened, look at my own personal struggle, all the heartache and the yearning, and ultimately the celebration of my fight against a system that professed to protect me but really protected everybody but me. It was very important to me to tell the story exactly as it happened. After all, it is a nonfiction memoir. I always think about my grandfather Winston when I tell this, because when talking about his book, The River War, which, as you may know, was about the Boer War, told Clementine, I do not think the book will bring me many friends, but friends of the cheap and worthless variety are not of very great importance. After all, in writing, the great thing is to be honest. So honest I definitely was. And hopefully someday, soon, Oklahoma will see fit to join the growing number of other states who are changing adoption laws to protect the histories of those who are disconnected from their origins. Now, for this adopted kid, finding the granddad that I had so long to find was really a dream come true, as you can imagine. Discovering that the granddad is Winston Churchill was a bit hard to wrap around mentally. But for me, unless I'm watching the History Channel or I'm listening to someone extol his virtues or quote him in a speech, he's simply my grandpa. I have this kind of cellular ancestral connection to him that's as comfortable as an old shoe. And that is the same connection that keeps everybody inextricably linked to our ancestors. Now, I will admit to you that I am unabashedly crazy about my granddad, Winston, and the more I learn about him, the crazier I am about him. Now, that may sound a bit peculiar to you, and that's okay, because believe me, I'm the poster child for believe it or not, and I've come to embrace that. I'm perfectly okay with it. When I was told in 1980 that I had a grandfather who loved me, the notion flew in the face of what I had believed to that point. And it's not so atypical for adoptees, that I must have somehow been unlovable, that maybe I wasn't worth keeping, or that something, was wrong with me. So finding that grandfather who might have cared about the whole thing became the most important quest of my life. And believe me, I pursued it with nuclear determination. Maybe some of that Churchill tenacity, I don't know. I had imagined, however, that my grandfather would be a farmer. When I pictured him in overalls, working around the farm. I don't know why, it's just, that was in my imagination. I certainly did not picture him in a jumpsuit, commanding the English forces in the war rooms, believe me. So there was a great deal of history to be learned. When you find out you're a Churchill, what an enormous life to try to wrap around and learn about. So I tend to tell stories about him, probably more often than some of my friends care to hear. But I want to share a story with you today that maybe is something you've never heard about Winston Churchill before. I don't think many folks realize that Winston Churchill had a real connection with things otherworldly. He was very open-minded spiritually. He commented on more than one occasion that he never saw much sense in being afraid of things you couldn't see or you didn't understand, that it just didn't make much sense to him. Well, I'll offer you a couple of examples of things that happened to him in his life. The first one was when he was a teenager, around 1890. And one day he told a friend of his, he said, "You don't know this, but in the years to come, there will be a great war, a war like no one has ever seen before, and London will come under attack, and I will save the city and save the empire." Now, this was out of the blue to his friend as they were walking along the street, and his friend responded as less than convinced that he was with the savior of Britain, but Winston was not dissuaded and went on, "I have dreams of the future that you cannot see, and I will be the one to save England." Well, you know how that one turned out. Then many years later, after he had resigned his second prime ministership, which you may recall was 1955, he was in his study painting. Painting was his relaxation. A friend of his from France had given him a canvas oil painting of his late father, Lord Randolph Churchill, and the canvas had a tear in the corner of it, so my granddad had decided that he would repaint the entire picture. So he was painting along in his study, and all of a sudden he felt an odd sensation as though he was being watched. And he turned around to see his father sitting in an armchair behind him. They proceed with a rather long, involved conversation, in which his father asks him to fill him in on the happenings of the world since he died in 1895, so 1895 to 1955. And just as he had criticized Winston when he was alive, he continued to be very critical during this exchange. If you know anything about Winston's relationship with his dad, Lord Randolph seldom had anything kind to say about his son. But Winston explained to his father that he really had done quite well for himself, that he had led the country through a horrific war, he had served as prime minister twice, and had held many other cabinet posts and had received the Nobel Prize for literature. His father persisted with comments that he doubted Winston could do any of it, started to light a cigar that he was holding in his hand, and vanished. Now, Winston told the family about this visit, and at my dad's request, eventually wrote it down so it would not be lost to time. Some years later, after Sir Winston's death, and with my father's permission, Martin Gilbert, the great biographer and historian, included this story in one of his books. So a little something you may not have heard about Winston Churchill. Thank you very much for having me today. I don't want to be beeped off the stage or anything. And as my granddad would say, keep boogering on. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever met any of the Churchills?
I met my half-brother Winston and my nephew Randolph. I've met a few of them, yes.
And what was their reaction? How did they accept you?
They say nothing. They say nothing. Yes. Yes.
Do you know of any work that's been done in the area of, I guess years ago it was considered taboo to have a child born out of wedlock, and oftentimes rather than them being adopted, the child was just taken into the family, but the father may be listed as no father. Is there any work that you know of that's been done that would allow you to go back and try to identify who the father was?
Well, I don't know how I would do more than I've done. You know, finding the person who assisted Lloyd Rader, it's a long, very evolved story, but what it boils down to is Averell Harriman, you will remember, was the governor of New York, and in 1955-56, he was seeking the Democratic nomination for president. And Randolph Churchill was here to cover the conventions. So after a great deal of research, because it was not covered by the press whatsoever, but through talking to Raymond Gary's son and daughter-in-law, I discovered that, in fact, Averell Harriman had been at the Capitol to dinner with the governor. So I was able to place him here. No one has said anything about interacting with Randolph Churchill, but we're fairly certain that's why he was here. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know what else I would do to know somebody who knows somebody. Sure. Yes.
Your father, Randolph, is he still alive, or when did he pass away, or did you ever get a chance to meet him?
Oh, no. No, he passed away in 1968, 3 years after Sir Winston, actually. Oh, how I would love to utilize DNA. You know, I've consulted with Cellmark Orchid, who's one of the most prestigious DNA organizations in the world, and what they tell me is that as things stand now, and this was a couple of years ago, so I may not be entirely up to date, that because of the half-sibling status, that it would not necessarily be possible to establish anything through DNA. They're continuing to work on those tests, but because of the way I'm related to everyone and folks who are still alive and folks who are not, it would be very difficult to do that, even if I had the DNA of the people who are around today. Yeah.
Was there any concern on the part of the family that you were doing this for financial gain?
Who knows? I don't have any idea because they're not talking. No, they're not talking about it. I don't know what they think. Of course, in my wildest dreams, I like to think that they would be okay with meeting me and getting to know me, and you certainly understand more about someone when you're willing to get to know them. But I can't answer that. I have no idea what their concerns are. I know that in most countries, and England is no exception, the fact that I was adopted, I'm out of the running for inheritance or anything like that, so I don't know what their concern would be that way. I felt the need to write this book for adoptees and folks who are looking for family and in a similar situation, because it is quite unbelievable. It's a really good read because it's true, just like the banner says, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. So, but that was my desire, was to help give people a little view of what it's like to be adopted and want to know your history but not be able to, and really how silly it is that it's an issue in 2013 anyway. Yeah. I certainly do. I do. Now, my two siblings on Sir Winston's side are both deceased. My half-brother died about 2 years ago, and my sister about 8 years ago. But I do have 4 half-sisters on my birth mother's side, and yes, we maintain regular contact, and I'm very thankful to have them in my life, and they seem to feel the same. Yes? It absolutely could be a different world today. Yes. Well, you'll understand if I say that I just have a titch of bias where my granddad's concerned. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh,
You're welcome.
You do have books that you can tell them how to get your book.
Karen reminded me that there are some books available. I didn't want to bring them in here. I'm not trying to sell you a book, but as a matter of convenience, if you'd like one, I'd be glad to go fetch them. Yes, there is a website, and it's on the bottom of this banner if you're interested in knowing more or hearing more of the story. Thank you all.
Now, a book recognizing today's program will, of course, be presented to our partner in education school, Celia Clinton, and it's a book compiled by Julie Andrews, and it says, here, you see the title? That Carrie Underwood is a treasury for all seasons. And I do need you to sign this. All right, and upcoming programs. I'm excited about this. Rod Bigelow Crystal Bridges Museum will be here next week, and then December 18th, the Booker T. Washington High School Choir. So thank you, Miss Paula, for helping make that happen. And now, normally we're about to leave, but we've got a big announcement from past President Del Dreyer on the election results. Del?
Thank you, President Karen. As chair of the nominating committee, it's my privilege today to introduce to you the talented leadership team that we will have leading us beginning July 1 of next year and announce the election results for today. Before I do that, I would like you to recognize and thank the other members of the nominating committee who served with me this year. They're mostly seated up front. Would you folks rise, please? And the names are on the screen. I'd like to begin next by asking those whose names I call now to come forward, please. And if you'd hold your applause, we'll give you that opportunity at the end. Our first elected official for next year is our trustee for our club foundation, Ray Tullius. Ray was here earlier this afternoon but had to leave, so he is not here to come forward. But he'll begin serving a 5-year term. Our president-elect and president starting in July 1 is Rhonda Renz. Rhonda? An immediate past president who will serve on the board next year, President Karen Keith. You want to go down front for a photo op? Our Sergeant-at-Arms, Matthew Bristow. Our Secretary-Treasurer, Monty Curry. Our Budget Chair and Secretary-Treasurer the following year, Paul Bowman. Our 2 continuing Directors at Large are Tina Miller and John Howland. And your President nominee, who will begin serving the following year as our President, is Jeff Hassel. And now for the new Director at Large, whom you voted on today and was certified by Vassar and Company as the winner, Tony Oliva. These folks, along with some appointed board members by our president-elect, will be the folks who will lead us through the next Rotary year, which will be our centennial year, the 100th year of our club's existence. Now, would you please give your round of applause and thank all these folks for their willingness to serve. Thank you, President Karen. Back to you.
We'll do a photo op right after the meeting. All right, for the next 3 meetings, I'm going to be sharing some photo Christmas cards from fellow Rotarians. So feel free to bring yours in or send one to me. You know how nice it is to get those in the mailbox. That's just pitiful, begging for Christmas cards. So. All right, so today we begin. This is John Rothrock's family. He shares photos of his sweet family, Julie, Alexis, and Thomas, with Merry Christmas wishes to one and all. And Matt Davis celebrates his wedding to Becky in this beautiful card. And yes, Matt, we do believe you made it down the aisle. Please be safe this next couple of days. Pay attention to the weather, no slipping and sliding. And then we will see you next week with Rod Bigelow and Crystal Bridges. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.